full metal stupid. Yeah, some people may have noticed that I am pretty aggressive in my comments, but I'm really laughing. The pearl clutching and the panty nodding from the other side, I got to them, and it's entertaining to me.
Interesting. You got to them. So, how many video responses have they made to you? How many of them spent 6 hours in the comments section responding to you? How many of them said that they were done only to come back and make a video? But okay, you're getting to us. Got it.
Usually I make fun of Fringe, I silently snicker to myself, but he was talking about me in his video and I decided to respond for funsies.
You really don't look like you're having fun. You actually look kind of like you're agitated.
If anything, my main point was to demonstrate that he and, everyone else who, blindly follows this stupid kid.
Now, this is something I have a problem with. Maybe I am a stupid kid. Okay, but blindly follow? Sophia, just think for a second. The position that I hold on race is not a popular position, and it goes against what people are told. Not really taught ever, just kind of implicitly assumed, like all throughout life, that all identifiable races are on aggregate the same in the brain. And it's just kind of an implicit assumption. It's never explicitly said, it's never defined or defended or anything, it's just kind of assumed in all discourse. And it's the default position, it is conditioning that one has to break out of. Now, just because egalitarianism is the default position, and just because it is a product of conditioning, doesn't mean that it's wrong, right? There's lots of things that are the product of conditioning that are correct. But to say that my viewers are just blindly following me more so than yours are, that's exceedingly unlikely, especially if you get into larger and larger viewers. I mean, if we're dealing with thousands of viewers here, okay? And the idea, and so we're getting into large numbers, and so the idea that mine on aggregate are more following than yours, given that you are defending, kind of the status quo, is just not really a position an idea that could be taken seriously. Bigots are zealots of the status quo. Okay? That doesn't mean you're wrong, doesn't mean I'm right, but that's just the nature of dominant ideologies. Followers are more likely to be in your camp.
Spent about half the video was going, I don't understand the relevance of this argument. I feel I was fairly successful.
First off, I spent about 2 minutes on that, and since you watched it, you knew that, so you're just lying again. In your video, you brought up recombination, which is taught to kids in freshman high school biology. Then you asserted that recombination makes tracing genetic ancestry an incoherent proposition without explaining why. And since I don't understand without an explanation, I'm suddenly retarded. You are the first geneticist I've ever heard to say that tracing genetic ancestry is an incoherent proposition, and you are the first egalitarian I've ever heard to say that recombination is somehow related to showing that all races on the planet evolved identical brain function despite radically different morphology. If I'm retarded, then so are most of the people in your own field. Perhaps the inordinate amount of time you spend on YouTube is a sign that you're just so much more brilliant than them and you're just a trailblazer in your field. Who knows, maybe in this video you'll actually make your argument.
I don't really know how else to make this clear, but when you're doing between group genetic comparisons, you kinda need alleles for that.
Okay, so the different behaviors of cats and rabbits can't be inferred to be genetic until we find the alleles. As I said previously, if this standard were used for all of biology, biology would have gotten nowhere. This is a race-specific standard. Now, if you want to say that humans are more complex than other animals and require more complex methods of inferring narrow sense heritability, that's fine, but saying that you have to find allele frequency differences is just bar raising. You haven't argued for the standard, you just keep asserting it.
And then he went on to whine about how he's just looking for narrow sense heritability, and why would Sofia argue against him with stuff that's already been demonstrated to be heritable? It's because he's not talking about narrow sense heritability no matter how many times he says it.
Sorry to intrude on your little delusion here, but it's not just me saying this.
Either way, what Fringe is actually doing is he's comparing between group genetic variation, but he's trying to do that without actually knowing whether or not there's genetic variation.
Now, contra Sofia, total brain size does correlate with IQ among individuals, about zero point 0.4 within a certain population. I'll have a link to a study on that, and anyone can go ahead and read that. It's different for men and women, and I don't recall entirely what it was. So I'll just link to the study. For comparison's sake, it's been found that the correlation between muscle size and isometric muscle strength, isometric meaning they don't take into consideration speed, strength, or power, but basically how strong are you from, from a non-moving position, and then the strength of your initial contraction, right? Pure strength as opposed to speed strength. Anyway, the correlation between total muscle size and pure strength is about 0.24. And I'll have a link to that study too, so you can see what sample size, what populations they were dealing with. So in whatever populations they were dealing with, correlation between brain size and IQ is about 0.4. Correlation between muscle size and pure isometric strength is about 0.24. So that should give you a little bit of an indicator of how significant this correlation is. But why Sofia is bringing this up is kind of silly, since I think IQ is only one measure of intelligence, and I think that the Native Americans are smarter than Europeans in ways not measured by IQ tests. Okay, Native Americans and Arctic peoples have much bigger brains, yet much lower IQs. However, Arctic people do much better at visual spatial tasks than Europeans, and I would imagine that other Native Americans do as well, from the northerly areas who have the physically larger brains. And males do better than females at visual spatial tasks, suggesting that visual spatial intelligence requires more brain volume for somehow. This is not a hypothesis that has a whole lot of evidence in favor of it, but on the other hand, there's not a whole lot of evidence contradicting it, and it does explain a lot. But if you just watch Sofia's video, you would think that I was saying that brain size equals IQ equals intelligence in some very rigid, stilted manner. No, that's not true. I think Sofia is... She's not overtly lying, but she's given these kind of implicative lies in the hopes that people won't actually watch my video.
He talked about dogs again. Now, the vast majority of those are going to be in non-coding regions, in which case they are selectively neutral and don't mean anything.
Interesting. So Sofia wishes to dismiss the results of the two studies I cited because they thought it was appropriate to measure genetic distance using SNPs. Sofia is apparently going to tell us why using SNPs is inappropriate.
I mean, let's be real here. So Fringe is like, oh, but look at the variation. The variation is like higher within breed than between. Yes, the single nucleotide polymorphism variation, dipshit. This was the point of my video yesterday. You don't understand these genetic markers and what they mean.
Finally, the argument. Okay, so the SNP variation within breeds, despite being larger, could be less meaningful. Okay, this is moving the goalposts. I was simply saying that there's more genetic variation within breeds than between them. And Sofia did not contest that. She just said that the variation within breeds might not be as meaningful in terms of phenotypic differences than the differences between breeds. And that may be true. I don't know, but that's not what I was talking about. Okay? Now, this may be getting a little bit far afield for the viewer, and I think the viewer may have lost sight what this is about. This is about Lewontin's fallacy. Right? Lewontin's fallacy, as used in practice, meaning that there's more genetic variation within races than between them, therefore races don't matter. And a response to that is that, well, there's more genetic variation within dog breeds than between them. Right? So clearly this fallacy is a fallacy. Sofia Rune did not deny this. She's just denying the difference of the within breed significance of the SNPs, which, when we look at this in the context of it being a response to Lewontin's fallacy, is entirely irrelevant.
You're talking about variation as if this is variation that leads to phenotypic difference.
No.
It's pretty well not. You're talking about SNPs. You don't know what they are. It's... Yeah. Anyone who actually has even a little bit of a grasp on this topic is pretty well seeing you for what you are at this point, Fringe.
Maybe you're right. Maybe they are. Just one question. Is fake laughter part of your hobby? But as for your video getting big, look, this race stuff is causing a ton of cognitive dissonance for atheist cult. The position is basically impossible. You have these identifiable races, identifiable by anthropologists, geneticists, 5-year-olds. These identifiable races have different average cranial capacities, and environmental causes are implausible since the groups with the largest brains are actually impoverished. That's the Schwerpunkt. That's what this argument is about, and that's why atheist cult is reacting so strongly. It's a simple argument that they are ideologically opposed to, yet they have no effective defense against. The only really way they have of dealing with this is actually through diversion. The notion that all environments on the planet have had identical selective pressures just for cognitive ability is impossible, and they know it. And the differences in gross morphology, to a reasonable doubt, prove it. You then come in and say some sciencey stuff, backed by your credentials, and as far as I know, a sound technical knowledge of the workings of genetics. I mean, who knows? You could just be, completely making shit up, and I wouldn't know. And then you say that what you're saying debunks what I say, and that I'm just a big stupid head. Okay? You provide these people succor. You provide them a nice warm womb. Your credentials and your deep technical knowledge of the workings of genetics provide for them a plausible, if you don't think too deeply and you don't look too closely, kind of a plausible alternative. You pull new standards out of your ass, like me having to say precisely what the selective pressures were that caused the brain size differences, or me having to identify the specific genes responsible for various cognitive functions that add up to what we call intelligence. These are just arbitrary bar raising. I mean, these things don't need to be found. Right? You're just making this up. And this is a way of diverting attention from the Schwerpunkt and easing the cognitive dissonance. Notice you don't really make any case for egalitarianism. Now, in kind of your lame attempts at defending the Schwerpunkt, you end up being forced to make a positive case, but really it just amounts to a restatement of your impossible position. And what this tells me is that in practice, whether you know it or not, what you're doing is not really making a case for egalitarianism for your position in opposition to ours. What you're doing is you're trying to divert attention from the Schwerpunkt and ease your cognitive dissonance.
I know this may be shocking to people, but brain size does not unequivocally predict intelligence.
Never said it did. Then Sofia Rune goes on an irrelevant tangent about academic marginalization. I think Sofia should listen harder. I was deliberate and careful to say that academic mobbing can lead to sham peer review, and if egalitarians generally were in control of peer review, they could end up stifling academic freedom, or end up stifling views and using peer review to censor. Maybe not even intentionally or even by design, but that's just kind of how it ends up happening. Now, notice I was speaking in a hypothetical, and that was deliberate. Now, ironically, assuming Sofia's description of events regarding Lon are accurate, she's actually kind of supporting my claim that peer review isn't all it's cracked up to be and can be kind of biased, just in this instance, biased in the opposite direction of what I would presume. Now, this is the first time I've heard of Lon's microcephalon study, but Sofia's criticism sounds kind of limp. Microcephalon apparently has to do with cell division that works on multiple parts of the body, including the brain. Lon argued that this gene can help explain the evolution of brain development, and of course, when you're explaining the evolution of brain development for humans in the past 100,000 years, you're going to be talking about racial differentiation. Now, Sofia Rune simply pointed out that this gene works on other organs too. Okay. So it works, for example, on the lungs, and she said some other organs. So it works on other organs, including the brain. Therefore, it's not a brain gene. Right? She said it's not a brain gene, and then went on to talk about its effects on other organs, even though it works on the brain. So apparently, because it works on other organs, there won't be any selection pressures for certain alleles of microcephalon for its effects on the brain, because it has effects on other organs. Again, just going entirely off of what she said, her argument is weak sauce. I bet if I got a more balanced portrayal of what's going on, it would be even weaker sauce. And I'm not even particularly interested in Lon's work. I'm not like some partisan on this. This is the first time I've ever heard of it, nor is his work even particularly necessary for what I'm arguing about. But if the kinds of argument Lon is getting is similar to Sofia's, then yeah, they do appear to be ideologically motivated. That's the only way I can imagine such high IQ people making such a dumb criticism.
Fringe also, the crux of his argument is that I'm an egalitarian.
No.
Sofia being an egalitarian is not directly related to my argument in any way. I was arguing this stuff long before I ever met Sofia. I'm simply saying that I don't trust her because she is a zealot for the status quo. Sofia then goes on to contend otherwise, how she's just being objective and open to all possibilities, but given how she contacted the skeptical heretic and loaded him up with sources before, the Shambush debate, and waited until after in order to contact me, and how her criticisms of egalitarians are always specific and measured, while her criticisms of hereditarians are always generalized and made to reflect the entire position, she's taken a side. Look, it benefits her to claim to be neutral and objective. Oh, look, a neutral third party and a biologist, no doubt, is agreeing with the egalitarians. And she's not an egalitarian. She hasn't taken a side. She's just a neutral observer. If Sofia was a dishonest person, she would claim to be neutral when she wasn't, wouldn't she? She says that we can't rule out the possibility that every region on the planet had identical selective pressure for cognitive function. This is not being conservative. This is being reactionary. This is a reactive defense of an impossible ideological position. However, I was incorrect in assuming that Sofia Rune supported affirmative action. And the reason for this is because in a Skype convo that she had with Austrialcow that they posted on YouTube, Sofia Rune was defending affirmative action in part of the convo that I listened to. Sofia Rune was saying why we should have affirmative action. And apparently, I later learned that Sofia Rune was simply playing the devil's advocate in that conversation. She was not defending a position she actually holds. She was just playing the devil's advocate.
Unlike Fringe, I did not go out and learn these things in an attempt to, debate or win an argument. I knew it already.
Well, first off, that actually contradicts what you've been saying for a few months now, which is that you research race specifically for fun, and that going on the web and arguing against people like me is kind of a hobby for you. So, yeah, you're lying. You research this stuff to win arguments. Yeah, you're lying. And second off, while I am learning lots of things in response to actual arguments, just like you, I contend that my initial interest in this was non-ideological. I was a Marxist when I first started reading The Bell Curve, and then I was actually a neocon when I finished reading The Bell Curve. Not like a neocon, raw George Bush, but no, I was a hardcore ideological neoconservative who believed in spreading democracy to everyone around the world as a humanitarian mission to reach the end of history. I was a true believer neocon, not a Bushite or whatever. Anyway, now which position tends to have more bigots? The more or the less popular position? Which position on race is more popular, the egalitarian or hereditarian position? Okay. So we can assume that you, Sofia Rune, are more likely to be a bigot than I. Just based on that. Now, both of us will contend that we're not bigots, right? But that means nothing because neither of us would say that we were bigots if we were.